very good morning to all, and welcome to this session on panel discussion on financial markets under global pandemic COVID 19. COVID 19 has impacted our lives in every possible way, and financial markets have also not been immune to the global pandemic. However, the reaction of financial markets have all been but expected. To take us through this maze, we have two distinguished guests with us today morning. Mr. Rohan Sikri, a senior partner at the Xander Group, and Dr. Sami Syed, a leading academician and a visiting faculty at IMI Kolkata. We will begin with Mr. Sikri, who will share his thoughts. Then we will invite Dr. Sami to give his insights on the topic, post which there will be a Q&A session where you can ask questions to the speakers. Without much ado, I now invite Mr. Sikri and give a brief introduction about him. Mr. Sikri is a senior partner at the Xander Group based in Singapore. He is also the managing director, Xander Investment Management, heads the firm's real estate investment management program for Asia, and chairs the investment committee for Xander Fund Vehicles and the credit committee for Xander Finance. He is also a member of the firm's management committee. He is also a board member of Virtuous Retail South Asia, a Singapore headquartered integrated retail mall developer, owner and asset management for India. Mr. Sikri's almost 20 years in the real estate industry across multiple Asian markets include India, Indonesia, Japan, Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand and the Middle East in different roles through market cycles provides him a unique insight into identifying opportunities, market dislocations and pricing risk. A graduate in commerce with honors from St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, he secured an MBA with dual specialization in finance and marketing from the International Management Institute. He has played national level squash, been a state level swimmer and enjoys golf. Now I invite Mr. Sikri to share his thoughts and give us some insights into the financial markets under COVID-19.
Thank you, Professor Poddar, for the very kind introduction. What we could, I'll spend a few minutes on sharing some thoughts, and then perhaps, if there are any further questions that you would like to ask that you think the students might be interested in, we could probably do that as well. So firstly, a warm welcome to all our young students. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm an alumni of the business school, and I'm a proud alumni, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you as you start your journey with the International Management Institute. I'm sure you will have a great time. Obviously, we're in innovative times, so you'll have to be like the rest of the world is. You'll have to be innovative in your manner of learning, absorbing, and obviously the entire experience. But hopefully things will revert to normal soon, and you'll get the best of both worlds. I think it's just before I get into my thoughts on the pandemic, I just want to overlay that I think knowledge at this point is very limited for obvious reasons. I'm sure all of you read the news, and I think at this point, all of us who are deep into business, financial markets, investments, operating companies, are really trying to figure out what is the depth, the length, and eventually the impact of the pandemic. And the short answer is it's extremely uncertain. However, I just two kind of pieces of two observations that I have for all of you who are starting out an MBA right now. I think your timing couldn't have been better, frankly. You always want to go to business school when the world is in recession. It's not a very positive thought, but a lot of people plan their time in business school when the markets are down and the world is in recession, and then when they're graduating, they are obviously, hopefully their timing is perfect, and you will have a good start to your careers when you graduate 2 years hence. So firstly, your timing is fantastic, so congratulations to all of you. Secondly, I think the other interesting part is you're going into a business program when the world is in panic. pretty much. And I think that in itself will gear you both mentally, from a focus perspective, from a learning perspective of how to manage risk. The world has generally seen a boom, a bull run, if you want to call it that, for the last, I would say, 10 years. It's been a great run for the global economies, as you all know, post the global financial crisis of 2008, post 2010 or 11. I think if you look at most economies, there could be a few exceptions, but generally, if you see growth over the last 8, 9, 10-year period, both in terms of GDP growth, value creation, public markets, stock exchanges globally, job growth, etc., all have been very, very positive over the last 10 years. And I think that gives people a very different mindset when they're going into business school, because they think the world is all about very blue skies and nothing can ever go wrong. And as you gear yourself as business managers, I think it's important to understand both sides of the coin, that it's not all, one way. Markets react in cycles, they behaviorally over time. And I think you will be far more geared as future leaders, business managers, of how to wrestle with market cycles. So I think, in short, I think your timing is great, and good luck to all of you. Let's talk. Spend a few minutes on what's happening globally. Firstly, I don't think I'm going to be saying anything that you already don't know, but I will try and summarize, some of the things that we're seeing from the various businesses we own and run. So just to give you a very quick background, and Professor Poddar was very kind enough to give you some of the things that I do. But effectively, we have exposure to consumer businesses, to real estate assets, where effectively is a indirect or a synthetic play into certain businesses. For example, we own shopping malls in India. So effectively, that is a consumer business, but we obviously own the infrastructure. So we get to see the consumer side of the business quite closely. So I would call those B2C businesses or B2C exposure. We then have other platforms where we own industrial parks, where we own office buildings, which again is perhaps a B2B business, because we get to our exposure to income from those portfolios is basically corporations, businesses, right? And the underlying businesses are different types. They're consumer businesses, they're manufacturing businesses, they're technology businesses, etc. So from where we sit, we can kind of get a sense of what's going on purely through our customer behavior, right? We get to see behavior of our customers, and I'll try and use that lens to give you some color around what we see, what we're seeing, and that narrative is obviously changing with time, as time passes, as sort of infection trends change, as certain economies do better, the reaction obviously is different. So it's quite bespoke. It's not really linked to a specific country. I think it reacts different. Markets react in different ways depending on what's going on the ground. So here's where we are. I think high level, what's been a big anomaly, which we're also trying to figure out, is the dichotomy between public markets and businesses, right? And there could be 2 or 3 sort of theses behind that, and I will touch upon it. But I'm just going to give you some color. You probably already know this, but effectively, public markets have been doing phenomenally well over the last 3 or 4 months. So 4 months, I would say. So I think at the end of March or first week of April, we had a massive sort of dip in public markets, where we saw literally some companies erode 50% in value in terms of market cap, and I think this was late March, early April, and then it recovered, substantially. It was a sharp V. I mean, even a V has some kind of degree in it, but I think this was a really sharp V that came back by mid of April. And I think everybody at the time was perplexed about what is happening, because if you looked at any large corporation, I shouldn't say any, there have been some companies that have been COVID beneficiaries, like e-commerce companies and the like, where pharma companies, where effectively this pandemic has made their businesses even more relevant. So I'm carving those aside. Those are obvious plays like the Amazons and the Walmarts and the Facebooks, etc. Google, Apple, all these companies are obviously perhaps more relevant today than they were even before COVID. But I'm talking about generally consumer companies, travel companies, airlines, where the obvious answer was that I don't know whether this business is going to. We were all asking ourselves that what is the future of these businesses? Because of they were reporting losses, job cuts, zero earnings, etc. But the markets continue to reward these companies. So there's that big dichotomy that is happening in the public markets. And one theory could be that people are expecting a recovery sooner than it might actually occur. And if that actually happens, then they'll be beneficiaries of making those investments. So effectively, it's a market of buyers and sellers, and it's all about perception about what is going to be the outlook going forward and what is actually going to happen. Now, as markets around the world have gotten sophisticated, information generally has been available to all, especially in the more developed markets like the US, Europe, Japan, China to some extent, where transparency of information leads to business decisions. But this dichotomy really is more around a pandemic where information is a big question mark. So I think after a long time, the same information or the certainty of information is not available to all buyers and sellers. And I think that is creating some volatility in markets. And it's all about expectation, right? It's about if we have 100 students here, give or take, if we run a poll today within the 100 students saying, okay, how many people think that life is going to return back to normal in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, 36 months? I'm sure if we create a pie chart of that, it'll be a fairly diverse set of colors that will emanate. And that's exactly what's happening in the markets, right? People have different perceptions, different pieces of information, and there's a lot of uncertainty. But with uncertainty also comes opportunity. But you want to make sure that you sort of get, be on the right side of that. Because if you're on the wrong side of it, it could be devastating. Having said that, I think the other piece that is fueling markets is liquidity. You might be reading that all governments at this point in time, large economies of the world, US, UK, France, Germany, Japan, Singapore, India to some extent, have effectively given liquidity equivalent, or let's call it COVID financial support, equivalent to between 5 and 20% of their GDP. Now, these are big numbers. So effectively, what the government is, in order to preserve value, in order to preserve the health of their economies, are effectively taking monetary measures to provide liquidity to their economies. And effectively, the thought process there is that, look, this is a balance sheet test. There is going to be impairment of income over the next 12 to 18 months. And we need to support our local businesses to make sure that they get through this. And I think that's pretty much the thought process, which was implemented quite successfully during the 2008 global financial crisis. Though I think it's a lot worse this time, but it wasn't. And by the way, when it was being implemented in post the 2008 global financial crisis, led by the US, I think Bernanke was effectively the lead on that as the governor of their central bank. Effectively, they received a lot of criticism because there are obviously pitfalls to doing that in terms of efficiency of businesses, etc. But you know what? At the end of the day, I think it played out right for them and the rest of the world at the time, as I talked about the growth that happened post the crisis. And I think the element of liquidity injection this time is going to be even higher, or has already been declared to be higher, because it has already worked the last time around. So I think the certainty or the conviction of success that this strategy would work is higher this time around. What will eventually happen is, again, to be determined. We don't know. But I think that has been a big reason for the public markets to be, I'm going to go out and say this, inflated at some level, because the cost of capital has substantially, and the availability of liquidity has increased, cost of capital has come down, and hence valuation of assets has gone up, especially for the more relevant post-COVID franchises. So if you look at any of the big technology companies, Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, and the like, they're all hitting market caps of $1 trillion and more, which is the value of these companies, anywhere between 750 billion to 1.5 trillion. Now that's massive. So I think that's effectively that, valuable companies are going to be even more valuable because of this liquidity. And I think this whole post-COVID era will sort of justify that. So that's what we see pretty much in the public markets: liquidity from governments, uncertainty on recovery, and then on the private side, I think it's very, very bespoke. It's less inflated for sure, because I think the reason why the public markets have reacted far more positively is that you can get in and out of your investment, right? That's the whole element of a public exchange or a public market or a stock exchange. So liquidity is a big concern today, and hence I think private investments are not necessarily achieving the same inflation in value that the public markets are achieving, because of the fact that there's an illiquidity discount in the private markets and there's a liquidity premium in the public markets. So I think that itself is also sort of creating this dichotomy. And I think it's a big opportunity for a lot of people who are thoughtful about their investment thesis and about their businesses going forward. So I think that's about all I have to say for now, unless, Professor Poddar, if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. Sikri. We'll take questions a little later, but it was wonderfully explained, the role of liquidity, the divergence in expectations, and how it is creating a dichotomy in the public financial markets and the economic markets. Okay, so we'll take the questions a little later. Once Dr. Sami Saeed also shares his perspectives on what the academicians think about it. And so I would now like to invite Dr. Sami Saeed, and just to give a brief introduction about Mr. Saeed. Dr. Sami Saeed holds a doctorate in management from International Management Institute, New Delhi. He has worked for almost a decade in industry, mainly in investment banking and with Royal Bank of Scotland. He has been associated with academics for the past 9 years and has taught at prestigious B schools all over India, including IMT Ghaziabad and SIBM Pune. His areas of research and classroom teaching include investment banking, mergers and acquisitions, financial derivatives, risk management, corporate finance, and treasury and foreign exchange. So I would invite Dr. Sami Saeed to give his perspective on the global financial markets under COVID-19. Post which, okay, we'll open the floor, okay, and take questions, okay, from the students. So if it is okay, you can. Then I invite, okay, Dr. Sami Saeed.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody, and thank you, Professor Poddar, for that introduction. Thank you, Mr. Rohan, for providing great insights from the industry perspective. Before I continue, I'd like to say one thing, that we had a storm yesterday, so the internet connectivity is not that good. So we are having a lot of issues in Mumbai because it was pretty bad last night. We had a big storm, and trees are uprooted. There's a lot of water logging in Mumbai. So if I get disconnected, I would like to apologize for that. In fact, I was disconnected a bit when Mr. Rohan was speaking. So just apologies if it gets disconnected, because we are seriously having an issue in Mumbai. So great. I would like to continue with what Mr. Rohan had said about wonderfully explained so many things, and his theme was more about liquidity and how liquidity is driving the public markets. If you look purely at equity market, or even if you look at gold, look at gold as a commodity. So if you look at markets generally, equity market and gold market, from an academic perspective, we will say that they tend to have a inverse relationship. But right now we are seeing something very different, because generally gold is considered as an inflation hedge or a safe haven. But now equity, the riskiest asset is equity, and that is going up. And gold is a safe haven, and that is also going up. So we are seeing a very interesting turn in markets with respect to the movement or the relationships between assets, different assets. Now Mr. Rohan also touched upon many things with respect to e-commerce companies. So I would like to add that from an India perspective, the biggest example we can give of e-commerce company is Reliance, because in India what has happened is the Nifty index, it touched almost 7,500 in March, and now it's touching around 11,200. As Mr. Rohan rightly said, it's a V recovery, so in a space of 3 months or so, the market has given a dramatic comeback even in India. But the Indian markets were driven by the, as you call as the index heavyweight or the biggie, the Reliance Industries. So Reliance Industries, what it has had many investors coming in to invest in its Jio platforms. So what that has done, it has shifted Reliance from being an oil-driven company to a technology company. So today Reliance valuation has gone up. It has gone up dramatically because of valuation of Reliance as a oil to technology conglomerate. So that one change we can see, that investors around the world, I'm specifically speaking about institutional investors here, they have lapped up shares in all the companies which Mr. Rohan said, Amazon, Facebook. They have lapped up, and they have also lapped up shares, bought huge big stakes, investment worth billions in Reliance Industries, because they feel the potential in India is there because of the consumer base, because of the future prospects of the telecom industry, and the way Jio is running. Jio and Airtel, they are the two biggest players right now. And after the AGR, the annual gross revenue issues with respect to Vodafone, now Jio and Airtel seem to be the top two companies driving the telecom market in India. So we can see that the technology stocks, not just in US, but in India also have gained a lot of interest from investors. Now in the US we have the index called NASDAQ. Now this NASDAQ is trading at an all-time high, mainly because it's driven by all these technology stocks. I would like to add that Apple, I was reading, correct me Mr. Rohan if I'm wrong, Apple had touched a valuation of 2 trillion, I think a few days back. In fact, when the Saudi Aramco IPO came in 2019, it was the vision of King Prince, Bin Salman, that his company should be a 2 trillion valuation company. So post IPO, I think it touched briefly. It was touted as the largest, it is the largest IPO ever. So it's around 30 billion IPO they came. And the valuation of that company touched almost 2 trillion, then it came down. Right now, Saudi Aramco has come down to around 1.2 trillion. And the Apple has gone to almost 2 trillion now. So you can see one thing we are seeing in this pandemic is that the demand for technology stocks or the future of technology and internet driven stocks is very bright. And what people are seeing here is that's, you can call them as even they have become like a safe investment now, because that seems to be the future nowadays, to connect in a situation of a pandemic. And as Mr. Rohan rightly said, we don't know when it will last. In such a scenario, these technology driven stocks and technology is going to be the future. Now, if you look at the politics which is going on in the US related to the TikTok, so in India we have banned it. In US now, President Trump has given an ultimatum that TikTok has to be bought before 15 September. So the politics also is taking its flavor in times of pandemic. That if Microsoft, there are talks between Microsoft and TikTok, Microsoft will buy out the US arm of TikTok. Now, that transaction, if we have to go by the words of President Donald Trump, the transaction is supposed to happen before 15 September. Now, that's going to be a big bang transaction again, which again focuses on technology. So one thing which we are clear about, I think Mr. Rohan also addressed, and I am also addressing, is that technology stocks are the, institutional investors are, right now crazy about technology stocks. The second thing I would like to say is more from a risk management perspective, that such events like this pandemic, which has happened, and as Mr. Rohan rightly said, that it's more serious than the 2008 crash, because this involves a lot of other things also. That was more a financial crash. In this, a lot of other things also are coming in. So in risk management, we call such events as a black swan event, or events which we don't see coming, and it is a one-off event which generally we it's very tough to predict and it's very tough to handle. So we are in a situation where this COVID-19 in risk management terms is a black swan event. It's a one-off event which was very tough to predict. Now, next I would like to talk about the governments, which again Mr. Rohan has addressed, that governments nowadays are trying their best to address the issues which with respect to consumption. So one example I'll give, that right now in India, the RBI has reduced repo rates, and the home loan rates, which means again the real estate market is a very important driver of the GDP of a country. So the home loan rates are right now at a 15-year low, which means RBI wants people to take home loans. RBI wants to create demand through lower interest rates. So that's just an example of how monetary policy can be used to address demand concerns. So what RBI wants is, RBI wants people to take home loans at a lower interest rate. I was reading an article that LIC Housing Finance, it's one of the largest lenders in India, they are giving home loans at 6.8% right now. That's very low. If you look at home loan rates, let's say even 5 years back or 10 years back, in fact, I had taken a home loan at 10 years back, it was around 10.25, and that was LIC Housing Finance. And now LIC Housing Finance is giving at 6.85. So now, again, it is possible because of the monetary actions taken by RBI. That's why the interest rates have come down. On the fiscal side also, in India, we have seen, the government trying to, help out small businesses. I think small businesses is where the maximum government is trying to focus by providing them, interest-free loans for now, and then they can repay it later when business is established. So the fiscal and monetary action specifically in India has been, trying to address and revive small business and increase consumption. So these are the things I want to discuss. One more thing I would like to address is volatility. Again, volatility. So in India, we have an index called as VIX. So the VIX was just shooting up. It was going, normally if you look at the India VIX index, the volatility will be in the range of, let's say, the numbers will be in the range of 15 to 20. Okay, the index now in March it had gone as high as 80, 90. So VIX went very high. It's the highest possibly VIX has ever reached since its inception in 2011 or 12, I think. So yeah, Professor Poddar, I think I have addressed a few things. I think we should open the floor for the students now.
Thank you, Dr. Saeed. I think we've got a good opinion on the global markets, both public and private, and we've also got very good insights on the Indian markets. So just to add a little bit, while all of us were initially perplexed, that why there is dichotomy between the financial markets and the economy. It is not the first time that this dichotomy has happened. In fact, while I was going through my Twitter handle, I found out that in 1954 a similar incident had happened, and Sir John Templeton, in his letter to his unit holders, had mentioned about the same things, that there are numerous and so complex factors which impact the public market, specifically the stock prices, that it's very difficult to anticipate. And the reasons which Sir John Templeton had mentioned in 1954 are so true right now also, that it could be because of excess liquidity, it could be because of paucity of good quality stocks, that prices could move up. So with this, I invite the batch of 2020-2022 to put forward your questions to our esteemed guests and get your doubts cleared, get whatever is in your mind, please ask them. They are all ready here to help us. So you can direct the questions to, yes, Rohan, you have a question, you can unmute yourself, and ask the question.
So I would like to Good morning, sir. First of all, you were really excellent, and your words were really great. It was really knowledgeable for us.
Yes, Rohan, go ahead.
As your company really deals with the investment and real estate acquisition investment,
We can't hear you very well.
So as your company mainly deals in this real estate acquisition and investment, right?
Well, as a firm, we are that is one of our businesses, which is real estate investing. We also do venture capital, we do public investments, we do credit. So we have multiple arms within the group that executes different strategies, which is why we have a reasonable color on what's happening in the public markets, what's happening in the private markets, what's happening in the venture world. So because we have exposure to these different businesses, including credit, which is debt.
So as of now, in that very group, in that investment and asset acquisition group, right? So sir, what are your views and steps that your company or you will be taking? Because in this pandemic situation, the economic crisis would be far, right? So due to that business is on declining mode and won't be able to recover in coming 1 year.
Right. So, I'm sorry, you're not very audible. So, did you say what we're focused on right now?
Yes. So what I'm saying is, in this pandemic, in this pandemic situation, due to this economic crisis, the market won't be getting up in the coming 1 year or 6 months, right? So in that particular group, the companies, that particular group, the position can be very declining. So what are the measures that company would be taking so that the business could groom up or it could be lifted?
You mean what we already own?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good question. Great question, actually. So I think these last 4 months. Are you a sportsman? You play any sport?
Yes, sir.
What sport do you play?
Handball, basically.
Okay, so you know the concept of attack and defense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in the last 4 months, we've been playing defense. Okay, what does that mean? You're protecting value. You're protecting your goal, right? You don't want, if you're playing football, I don't play handball, but if you're playing football or soccer, you want to beef up your defense. You want to protect value. You want to sit on cash. You want to be liquid. You want to plan for the worst. You want to hope for the best, but you want to plan for the worst, right? You want to look at every process that you run within your company, within your business. You want to look at every dollar of cost for optimization. You want to look at every process for optimization. So for the last 4 months, I think most businesses which are not COVID, like an Amazon or an e-commerce business or whatever, or a cloud business, which is obviously where the demand is amplified because of COVID. So let's park those type of companies aside. But any other company today should be really looking inward into their businesses, into their processes, into their cash positions, into their liquidity, into their talent, to prove more efficient and effectively get ready for a post-COVID world, right? So I think that's what we have been doing with each of our businesses, looking at, and there are businesses that we own and operate, and there are businesses that we're just investors. Okay, which is you're not active in operations, you're passive in operations. And I'm talking about operating businesses, which I think is the question you asked me, is effectively, in short, we're playing defense and we're making sure that we're preserving capital, we're preserving value, we're preserving our people, etc. So that's what we've been focused on.
Yeah. So just one more question. So that was a plan of action for the last 4 months, right? So, but in that particular sector, in the coming 6 months, there won't be any improvement, according to me. Because if we see the market condition in the next 2-3 months, we won't be able to move out of our houses as fully as before, right? So in the coming 6 months, that won't be very good for that particular sector.
So I think I'm a little less optimistic as you are. So what you believe is 6 months, I believe is going to be a year, right? At least, if not longer, right? And obviously, I think it's going to be a gradual trend. We don't know whether this virus is going to mutate any further. We don't know whether there's going to be a second round of infections. So we don't know all of that. So I think the whole narrative that I was alluding to when I was speaking is that this difference in opinion between buyers and sellers, between operators in a marketplace, is what creates transactions and opportunity. But it is zero sum at the end of the day, which means there will be winners and there will be losers. For example, if you think it's going to recover in 6 months, then you will look for companies to buy or own or be part of that follow that thesis, which means that if they have 6 months cash and they can sustain paying for the next 6 months, and you get a good price today on them, you will pull the trigger and invest in those companies from an investor's mindset, right? My view is it's going to be 1 year, so that set will not be applicable to me. So I'll probably short those companies, which means I'll sell them and you'll buy them, and that's how you create transactions. Who will be a winner or loser between your view and my view is only time will tell, right? So I think it's about developing a view and taking action according to that view. But I think what you have to do in this period of time is that you need to constantly revisit your view based on updated information. So it's not that you develop a view today and it doesn't change in 10 days. It could change in 10 days. It could change in 48 hours because information comes at you very rapidly nowadays. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I'm at least sharing a concept and a thought process with you.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Abhinav, okay, you can go ahead and ask your question, and you can also mention, okay, this question is directed towards whom. And please restrict your questions to one single question, okay, because we have a lot of students who have raised their hands and who would want to ask questions. So, Abhinay, okay, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, first of all, good morning to both Rohan and Sami. So first of all, I would like to say that it was a very informative talk that you both of us have given in the both different sectors. So my question is to Dr. Semi. So I would like to ask, since you have mentioned that it's in today's time everything is related to technology and everything is going to move in the field of technology. So do you feel that technology is the safest place or the safest sector to invest or to go forward in today's time, or you feel is there any other sector than that that in which we can invest and which we can give our time and devotion to it?
Okay, I'll answer that question. First thing is, if you are thinking as a retail investor, okay, what I was telling earlier was nowadays you have to differentiate between institutional and retail, and nowadays institutional investors are lapping up technology shares, right? Now, if you want to buy shares of Jio, you cannot, right? Because Jio is not listed yet. You can buy shares of Reliance Industries. So if you're telling me from a retail investor's perspective, I would say a better option would be that you make an SIP and gradually invest. I think that makes sense rather than trying to, sort of build a portfolio right now. Because in such tough times, as Mr. Rohan rightly said, it makes sense to be defensive rather than offensive. If you are thinking of making an aggressive strategy, I think this is not the time, specifically if you are a retail investors, because if institutional investors like Mr. Rohan, if they are thinking more from a defensive perspective, I think it makes sense to be defensive. So, earlier, I would just like to add further. Earlier, there used to be a thing called pharma stocks. So pharma stocks were defensives. If you see, let's say 15 years, 10 years back, 5 years back, pharma stocks, even today, if you look at pharma stocks, they are considered as a defensive sector. So if you want to invest in, that's what they usually say, if you want to invest in a down market, usually pharma stocks are supposed to be the defensive. Pharma and FMCG in India, that's what we say. These are the two markets which usually you invest in times of a downturn. So if you want, you can look at FMCG, you can look at pharma, and you can look at technology. So I would say, but right now, if you ask me that you want to make a portfolio and start investing, you are young, you might think that, I think this is not the time to right now invest. I think it's better to be defensive. But if you want to start investing, I think it makes sense to go for a bit of a mixture, diversify your portfolio, go with a bit of pharma stocks, go with a bit of FMCG stock, and then you can also think of technology stocks. But if you ask me, in India, I don't know, Podar sir, you can correct me. In India, there are not many technology stocks as such listed where I think people can invest. So if you look at most technology companies, they are not invested here, listed here. Podar sir, can you please correct me? Sir, please unmute. Sir, please unmute. Sir, sorry. Yeah.
If I were to take a call, on internet and e-commerce exposure in the Indian equity market, the two stocks, which come to my mind is Info Edge and IndiaMart. So Info Edge has an exposure to Naukri and to Zomato and to a lot of other listed platforms. So maybe these are we have restricted public companies in the e-commerce space. So maybe just an IndiaMart or an Info Edge maybe. But I think it's very important to understand the valuations of the company, because even good companies at very high valuations may not be a good investment bet.
So Abhinay, when I am saying it's time to play defensive, I think the valuation also. So right now, if you look at companies with stretched valuations, I think it would not make sense. And our space of technology investments for retail investors is limited in India to, as sir rightly said, just two companies. He could think of two, I could think of only Info Edge. I could not think of IndiaMart also. So it's pretty tough. I hope I have answered your question, Abhinay.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
So Raj, you can shoot your question.
So my question is to Rohan sir. Sir, do you think the unplanned implementation of GST and demonetization has put a brake on the Indian economy? And I would also like to know your opinion on LTCG.
What is LTCG? Long-term capital gain?
Long-term capital gain tax.
Okay. So firstly, I don't know if I'm fully qualified, but I will try to answer your question. So my view on GST and demonetization, frankly, is I'm a proponent of that measure that was taken. I'll tell you why. It's like institutionalization of an economy, right? If you talk about India as an economy, give or take, GDP is close to $2 trillion, so it's not a small economy. Where I think now India is perhaps the fourth or fifth largest in the world. It has gone ahead of France and UK. We were 7 until last year, and I think recently we're at 5, if I'm not mistaken. And you cannot have an economy of that size and scale that runs a feudal tax system. I just think that's unhealthy. Now, when you make this massive change or restructuring across a country that has 27 states, 1.4 billion people, and $2 trillion of GDP, it is going to be disruptive. There is no doubt about that. And I believe if people in India or anywhere else in the world had the expectation that this would just be a smooth ride after implementation, then I think that expectation was, in my view, a very high expectation. So I'm very positive on the GST changes. While it might cause short-term pain, and who knows what the short-term is, it could have been, I think it was implemented in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So it's been 3 years now. I believe it was implemented in July 2017, and it is settling down now finally, right? And it is encouraging people and businesses to behave in an institutional manner, which is to get on the tax grid, to be transparent with their businesses, to pay the government revenue when they're supposed to, and not do stuff on the side and stuff like that. So I'm a big sort of champion of anything that is moving towards institutionalization and being more aligned with the global economies, because that's how you're going to achieve growth and support and investor interest and government interest and geopolitical interest from the other economies across the world. So I think it kind of sinks you into the global system. Whereas if you have a system that is feudal, fragmented, not institutional, has multiple leakages, then over time you will become less competitive, less relevant, and may not get the long-term benefits that perhaps an economy of India's size should be getting. And I think the same applies to demonetization, frankly. We need to move away from this cash system. We need to get everybody on the tax grid. We need to be transparent. We need people to be, abide by law, be law-abiding citizens, and pay their taxes. And if demonetization, contributes towards doing something like that, then again, I'm a big sort of champion for change. Now, we can always debate the efficacy of it. We can always say, hey, it wasn't efficiently done. It could have been better implemented. Sure, but you got to start somewhere. It's very relevant for all of you, right? When there's a problem, the worst thing to do is ignore it, right? So don't ignore the problem. Attempt to fix it. If you don't, you may not get it right the first time, but at least you learn something out of that process, and hopefully you'll be better at it the second time. But don't ignore a problem. And that's what I appreciate with these GST and demonetization initiatives, where the government has attempted to fix a problem. And that's a very big positive as far as I'm concerned.
So don't you think it is an unplanned way of dealing with 1.4 billion of population? Because while you have nothing here, you can't experiment over with finance over this large chunk of population. So don't you think it must have a proper practice before implementation and proper proper grooming must be provided to all the ground level staffs, because while GST was implemented, I was in Banaras, and there was lots of businessmen who used to have a turnover of in crores. They were like crying because their business was messed up. And in Gujarat too, the plywood businesses were messed up because most of the plywood businesses are in our informal sector. Because India was in a deep informal sector, while pulling it out to all of a sudden to a formal sector without any grooming and without any proper any tuitions of giving them to it, how to move out of it, because many business has been collapsed. And India was known for its unorganized economy, because whenever the market goes on in 2008 too, the informal economy has been supported the Indian stock market and all, which have helped India to recover from the phases of bad times. So don't you think that proper grooming must be required before implementation of that? And while in the flowing market, while the market in the downtrend, all of a sudden our finance minister have implemented long-term capital gain tax.
Let me, in the interest of time, let me interject. So firstly, this seems to be veering towards a political debate, which I would like to refrain on. I don't want to get into politics. I'm not an expert. Perhaps other panelists are. But my only very short response to you is that things can always be better. We can always be critical. And all I'm saying is that you have to start somewhere. Don't you think it could be done better? Of course. Right? Look at your day-to-day life, right? Don't you think you can do things better? Of course. All of us can, right? But inaction is not the answer. That I will just leave you with that thought.
I would like to add to what Mr. Rohan is saying. See, in '92 when we did, globalization and liberation of the economy and all these kind of things, that time there was stern resistance to, online trading. So in '92, the brokers had and the investors had protested. There were a lot of protests to not let technology come and take care of the stock market. So, but then we implemented it. We have done it, and I think this year only SEBI had set a deadline for all physical certificates to be phased out. So, as Mr. Rohan rightly said, there has to be a start, and we started with the DMAT thing came in, so which means initially also there were problems. People held physical certificates. There were DMAT accounts also. Now people are converting it. So to answer your question, Raj, I think I support Mr. Rohan's theory that there has to be a start somewhere. And like we started with this whole globalization thing in '92, I think we need to have a uniform GST. I think is a definitely yes, as Mr. Rohan rightly said, that we can discuss if it's implemented. I think which is the point you are making, and again, the political side of it, let's keep it out because this is more a economics discussion. But yeah, implementation could have been better, surely. But the idea of having a GST, much like all the developed countries like USA, Canada, and we have a Canada dual system like Canada. So I think it's the right thing to do. Even I support that view.
So
we'll take two more questions. Okay, Mayank and Shreyansh. Okay, so Mayank, okay, please
raise your question.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, panel. It was really insightful of all the information that was provided to us. So my question is, don't you think that all these, all the companies and the stock prices are basically overvalued? Even Tesla came forward saying, Elon Musk tweeted that the Tesla stock price is basically overvalued. And then even after that, the valuation is still increasing instead of decreasing. Or maybe Reliance, when the right issues were there, the experts were basically asking people to sell it out because they don't see any progress in the share market. But even then, the Reliance shares are still increasing. So as an investor, like people who had already invested in all these shares, is it better to hold upon in the investment market, or should we sell it out for once? Because I don't think that what according to you will be the July report of all the companies and how the corrections will be done and how the things might get into a recession once again. Like there's high chances that these companies enter into a recession once again. So what are your views on this?
Is the question directed to me?
So anyone of you, like, I think both of you might.
So firstly, I would like to refrain from giving any investment advice because these questions are now becoming investment advice on what you should be doing with your portfolios. And I think you should do your own research and not rely on our views. Secondly, what does overvaluation mean? What you might think is overvalued, I might think is undervalued. Right? It's always relative value. And I will rely on a gentleman called Warren Buffett, if you've heard of him, who's obviously a very prominent investor, or has been for many, many years. And he says the stock market is like a voting machine. Right? The more votes a stock gets, the more value it creates. It is, and that is why these dichotomies happen. Right? So keep that in mind when you're evaluating companies. It's a voting machine for whatever reason. Right? It could be because it's a great brand, it's a great franchise, they're truly a great company, they're intrinsically undervalued. There could be several instances. And in some cases, very valuable companies, their prices are going down because people are giving them negative votes. Okay, that's number one. So remember that. Secondly, my view on value is relative. If there is a investor who's $1 trillion pension fund and is sitting on cash which is earning 0 today, their perception of value could be that if I earn 2% a year, I'm very happy because their opportunity cost of capital is 0 or negative in a negative interest rate environment. Whereas there's a hedge fund manager on the other side, if you know what a hedge fund is, right, whose hurdle rate for return to their investors are 15%, they would be sellers of the 2% stock, and the pension fund would be buyers of that stock. But independently, both those counterparties have taken very sound economic decisions based on their own situations. So in my view, there's no right or wrong. It's all about relative value. And you have to see it from people who are on either side of that trade.
I would like to add that in academics, we have the field of behavioral finance, which addresses the whole field of behavioral finance, addresses exactly what Mr. Rohan has said, that how an institutional investor will think, how a retail investor will think. There are totally different. And within institutional investor, there are many other investors. Within retail, there are risk takers. So it's very tough to have a simple plan for investment. That's not possible. And I think as Mr. Rohan rightly said, you should do your own research before you make investment decisions. Because we will think differently. See, one more factor is, I will think like a married man. You will think like a youngster. So which means again that's a difference. Which means we will have different perspectives on investment. I might prefer to take less risk. You might prefer to take more risk. You might say, "Oh, I have time on my side. I want to take more risk." Right? So these things all go into the field of behavioral finance. So to answer your question,
what I was trying to ask is, are we entering into recession again? Like, will we be seeing a recession again because of this overvalued and sentiment market system that's going on right now?
We'll take the last question, okay, from Shreyans.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. My question is for Rohan, sir. Sir, you mentioned about your business interest in the real estate and also your exposure to malls and offices and everything. And you also mentioned about the term balance sheet tested in the current scenario. So my question is majorly talking first of all, as companies' perspectives, expenses are still being incurred. Incomes have fallen down considerably. Revenues have fallen. Also, there's been rising debt. At the same time, from a perspective of a consumer, there is a kind of a pessimistic attitude everybody right now is facing, which is leading to the overall, creating a kind of gap between demand and supply. Also, there's a fall in the purchasing power of the consumer. So my question is basically, is there no solution to it? As in the problem, the gap which is being created, is it inevitable? As in the company are going to suffer and the consumers won't be able to spend on things which they used to. That is majorly my question.
No, I respectfully disagree with some of the statements because they are too broad. I don't think every company's income has gone to zero.
No, not. So actually, what I meant to say was the majority of the companies have not talking about zero income. I'm talking about fall in income. Like if we just keep the digital and the online industry aside, all the other industries have are in the losing end in some way or the other. So that is what I wanted to say.
No, well, yeah. So there's still a lot of consumerism happening everywhere in the world, right? And that is a big fuel for companies to earn income directly or indirectly. So again, at the end of the day, if Amazon is selling, which is an e-commerce company, and I know for a fact, and you can look at their earnings report, that their sales have skyrocketed. The question is, it's Amazon doesn't produce any product. It's a marketplace. So there are companies that are beneficiaries of those sales that Amazon is making on their behalf. It's just that the channel of distribution has changed or is accelerated to an e-commerce sort of distribution channel. But there are companies producing product to service those demand needs which are still happening. So I think there is an entire ecosystem of companies that are actually benefiting, not just the e-commerce companies. So I would encourage you to start reading earnings reports of consumer companies, right? Of what happened. I think the month of April was awful because I think just the world went into pause. But I think if you start looking at numbers for the months of, and we own a few of these, so I'm kind of have some direct exposure and to data here. But if you look at the months of May, June, July, it's come rearing back in terms of even for consumer sales. Now, with regard to consumer behavior, I think anything that requires a human interaction, interacting with other people, I think is going to suffer longer. So, to buy toothpaste, you don't need human interaction, for example, right? To watch Netflix, you don't need human interaction. To go to a cinema, theater, you need human interaction. And I think those businesses have a longer lead time for recovery than businesses that don't need the human interaction. And if you own or participate in any of those businesses that need a longer lead time, you need to assess that lead time, prepare for it, and address the issue at hand. Now, but if you ask me, are people never ever going to go to a cinema theater ever again in their lives? I could be wrong, but my answer is no. Once the health scare is over, and it could be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever that time horizon is, consumer behavior will revert mostly back to the mean. I think the COVID pandemic is going to accelerate transformation that was already on the cards. Digitization was already on the cards. Writing a bank check and signing on it is a dated process. It was going to anyway move towards digital and electronic or whatever you want to call it, except that this pandemic will massively accelerate that process. But it was a trend that already existed. And you can apply that small data point or that anecdotal example across multiple businesses. So that's something for you to think about.
We have a lot of questions, but I think, our guests, are short on time and we have to carry on with the next session also. So with this, I like to thank our distinguished guest, Mr. Sikri and Dr. Sami Saeed, for giving us a very insightful explanation about how the public markets are behaving, how the private markets are behaving, and why is it at a dissonance with the economic reality. They also not only discussed what the empirical observations were, but they also gave us insights into the explanation and the behavioral perspectives of it.
So I think, okay, it's been a great session. Okay. It's been a learning for all of us. Okay. And our new batch might have learned immensely, okay, from the two guests, okay, whom we have had. And thank you so much, okay, for joining us. Okay. And once again, on behalf of IMI Kolkata, I thank all of you, okay, for joining us for this session and making this a very interesting and a very insightful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Banik. Great to meet you, Dr. Sami. It's been a privilege to be here. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to interact with the students. Hopefully, we will be able to interface in person at some time, and I look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you very much. And thanks to Sami and thanks to Professor Poddar also. You have done a great job today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Rohan. Thank you, Mr. Rohan. Great insights. It's a pleasure hearing from an industry expert. It was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.